motion be agreed to. The honourable member for Mersey.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to speak with a feeling of great sympathy for the predicament that Jeremy Cleaver and his family faces on a daily basis. I thank the member for Windermere for raising this issue in the place so that we may offer our considered thoughts. It's interesting listening to all the previous speakers, and I thank them for their contributions, but I thought, well, I should take that out, and I should take that out. And I thought, well, if I take all of those parts out, it won't make any sense on my speech. So I apologise if I repeat, but hopefully be able to provide some more information as well. Like a number of the honourable members, I was part of the inquiry committee that investigated the use of natural botanical medicinal cannabis flower and extracted cannabinoids for medical purposes. As members may recall, this inquiry was brought to a close in light of developments at a national level in consideration of the use of cannabis in a medical context, namely the introduction of the Regulated Medicinal Cannabis Bill of 2014 as a joint private members bill with a cross-party support, and the subsequent referral of this bill in 2015 to the Legal and Constitutional Affairs Legislation Committee for inquiry and report. Additionally, the New South Wales Government established a planned series of clinical trials to explore the nature of cannabis for medicinal purposes, trials that are ongoing, and I can only imagine the impact of the current COVID-19 pandemic on the management and conduct of this essential research. Looking into the broad terms of these trials, we see stated on its official website that the New South Wales Government has provided over $9 million towards clinical trials in 3 areas to evaluate the safety and effectiveness of cannabis medicine. To 1, reduce seizures in children with severe treatment-resistant epilepsy through a partnership with the Sydney Children's Hospital Networks. 2, improve appetite and appetite-related symptoms in adult palliative care patients with advanced cancer. 3, prevent chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting in adult patients where standard treatments have proven ineffective. And 4, improve the control of symptoms including pain, nausea and lack of appetite in advanced cancer patients. Sufficient evidence collected from these highly quality clinical trials could help lead to registration of a cannabis medicine by the TGA, listing on the Pharmaceutical Benefits Scheme, the PBS, and potentially patient access at a subsidised price. Thus, there is real hope that robust clinical data will emerge from these trials that can inform future policy and regulation. In the meantime, we face the problem of how to allow safe access to what some see as a life-changing, naturally occurring remedy that can improve the management of their condition against what many consider to be a gateway drug into potential dependency and criminality. Maybe the impact of medical opiate dependency is an additional and intangible factor in official reticence to open up access to cannabinoid remedies. I'm mindful that since our inquiry, the Tasmanian Government has developed the medicinal cannabis controlled access scheme to allow defined medical specialists the opportunity to prescribe medicinal cannabis in the form of unregistered cannabinoid products where conventional treatments may have failed to give relief. Although only in limited circumstances, and as the Honourable Member for Windermere describes for his constituent, only when all conventional treatments have been tried and failed. The government does appear to be unique in Australia in that it has, in its own words, heavily subsidised the cost of the commercially produced cannabis medicine product. Interestingly, a quick search finds such a medical specialist in Hobart, advertising an initial consultation fee of $199 with the special offer of the conditional promise of guaranteed approval or your money back on your first consultation. Maybe this is not necessarily the nature of a heavily subsidised service that the government or potential patients and their families envisaged. What we also see reportedly, very low numbers of people actually accessing these services, with a recent media report suggesting only 16 applicants to the CAS scheme have been approved, and this was from a total of 35 applications in the just over 3 years that the scheme has been operating. In essence, have we created another set of barriers whereby legal access requires a bureaucratic and regulatory framework that could be said to focus on the needs of regulators over that of patients? One of the recommendations from the inquiry reports was to decriminalise the possession and administration of cannabis products on compassionate grounds for people that were using them for medical purposes. This was a recommendation that the government declined to support on the grounds that there is the absence of a regulated framework to support this, as it is an illicit drug in law. So any police officer is compelled to investigate and reports and/or sees any material thus discovered. However, it was pleasing to note that the Tasmanian Police Service has stated that they will not actively pursue people who make claims to be using cannabis products for medical purposes. It does, however, yet place such normally law-abiding people in the legally conflicted limbo that the Honourable Member for Windermere describes. If we look to New South Wales as the host state of the clinical trials, we see that it does have place in a medicinal cannabis compassionate use scheme that perhaps offers a model that could be adapted and enhanced for Tasmania. And to quote from its website, the Medicinal Cannabis Compassionate Use Scheme provides guidelines for New South Wales police officers about using their discretion not to charge adults with a terminal illness for possession of cannabis not lawfully prescribed if they are registered with the scheme, as well as up to 3 registered carers. With this comes a series of helpful resources and registration forms for both medical practitioners and potential applicants that was available from April this year. It does allow a GP to authorise the patient and carers to retain and administer cannabis-based products by confirming the patient's terminal diagnosis, whilst not being required to endorse the use of the cannabis as a treatment option, thus neatly sidestepping the conscientious objection issue that can cause barriers to equity of access. The provisions in both New South Wales and here in Tasmania in no way allow an individual to cultivate cannabis for such use, a route that would allow a possibly lower cost option for both patient and government. Although it comes with the perception that the cultivation of high THC cannabis could lead to inappropriate use by others. However, as we're only talking about just over 11 applications to the CAS scheme in a year, half of which are unsuccessful, it doesn't seem to be a huge issue for the government to find a way to accommodate the expectations and hope of those in genuine need. In these cases, hope may well be a powerful restorative to someone in need of relief. There are many anecdotal reports of patients accessing CBD products via unconventional routes, some of which do put people at risk of prosecution. However, it is gratifying to see that a recent media article pointed to a recent interim decision from the TGA proposing low-dose CBD products be classified to be available to Australian patients in consultation with their pharmacists. I genuinely hope that this option is one that can be adopted by the government, as it does relate to CBD as a cannabinoid derivative that has no psychotropic effect on a person. Additionally, I've heard anecdotal reports that CBD products are often sought out by people in pain as another option to try as a potentially low or no risk plant-based remedy, some of which suggest that for a person with an 8 out of 10 pain, that a CBD product may reduce it to a 6 out of 10. This is not to say that there's the suggestion that is a consistent effect, or one that's based on clinical trial findings, may offer potential for relief for some and nothing at all for others on an experimental try and see basis. Within all of this, we face another current conundrum whereby legal access requires a bureaucratic and regulatory framework that can be said to be system-centric rather than patient-centric. I can understand the concern of medical and research professionals that these products need to be properly regulated with consistent treatment and dosage protocols in place, together with an understanding of any possible side effects. It can also be argued that black market CBD material is apparently a loose and unregulated product that possibly borders on the anecdotal nature of the efficacy or not of homeopathic remedies. What we have is a complex issue where there seems to be no absolute right or wrong answers, just suggestions that we need to ask further questions to establish what is appropriate. I fully support the government's approach in terms of working collaboratively with the New South Wales clinical trials, but at the same time wonder if there's the opportunity to revisit its opinion of the findings of our inquiry into legalised medicinal cannabis. There was a suggestion in the final report that we might keep a watching brief on the developments of this subject at both the federal level and in other jurisdictions. 5 years have now elapsed since our inquiry reported its findings and made a number of recommendations, some of which have been accepted and enacted, others have not. We have an opportunity to revisit what is appropriate in a modern day world that is coming to terms with the implications of the long-term impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Additionally, if we sought to do this on a formal basis, we would need some fresh terms of reference and perhaps a new committee of inquiry. Maybe now in the very near future is the time for this. Its terms of reference could also be broadened to include a holistic review of pain management and support service options within Tasmania, and especially those within our outlying regions. If a new inquiry as an extension of the learnings from our last one is not deemed to be appropriate next step, at the very least, our current government may need to revisit how Tasmania's legislation may be more symbiotically aligned with that of the Australian government and our fellow state and territory jurisdictions. Perhaps this needs to be actioned as a matter of urgency, as we all have constituents that need our support in helping those to improve their well-being and enjoyment of life, especially those who are struggling to cope with seemingly irresolvable medical conditions that come with a range of difficult-to-manage chronic medical issues, including persistent pain and other forms of suffering that inhibit their daily lives. I thank the Honourable Member for Windermere for bringing on this motion, and I'm pleased to add my support.